Yeah, I mean that one was. Yeah, we'll start with Sophia. That one was yeah, really interesting to me from the point of view. I think I can't remember whether I'd seen. She did an interview with Joe, the sort of YouTube channel. I can't remember whether it was before or after, but like sometimes these things do. They seem to. I don't know. I don't know whether you're targeted by algorithms or whatever, but start seeing a guest reappearing and hearing bits of this sort of story. And I'd looked her up and was, her story was pretty incredible, and thought, I'd love to do a podcast about Sophia. I think it was also around the sort of time that I'd started getting involved with the Green Gazelle stuff. So the kind of idea of the strength training stuff and the fitness bit and all the rest of it was before Game Changers had come out, so there wasn't really there was fitness influencer type folks knocking around, but there wasn't. It didn't feel like there was a really compelling, I don't know, story behind any of those kind of folks. No disrespect to any of them, but whereas with Sophia, it felt like a real overcoming of something, some personal stuff that was incredibly tough for her. And so I think that's what drew me to the story. And then the kind of, there's the stuff that you'd probably expect from a power lifter who's vegan, the smashing of stereotypes and all that kind of stuff. But I think it was just the sheer grit and determination that came with that through her story that I think was probably what drew me to that story. But fascinating person to listen to, incredibly driven, but with no sense of ego, considering what she's achieved at such a young age. There was no. That's what I found amazing about her. Drive, humility, passion for veganism and animal welfare and the environment and so on. It wasn't driven out of a performance thing. It was almost like actually that the performance was she wouldn't probably say this, but almost like that was just something else to overcome, really, rather than an advantage. It was like it would probably be easier if I ate tons of chicken, but I don't, because I don't want to ethically. And so
yeah,
I think that's striking, because I think a lot of folks in the fitness influence kind of world, it's more positioned, whether it is or not, it's more positioned as an advantage. Do this and you'll be stronger or fitter, or you'll recover better and all that. And I've spoken to a few folks, actually. Matt Dickens is another one who says, it's probably is easier for most folks to not be vegan if they're, into their health and fitness.
Yeah, I think what I found particularly interesting was that her story is not, from everything that I've seen on her Instagram thing, she doesn't make a big deal out of being a vegan powerlifter. She's just a powerlifter that also happens to be vegan. And I think that you see it so often where it's this kind of point proving, like you say. She doesn't have any kind of sense of ego about it. She's incredibly successful in her world and in her sport, but yeah, the things that she chooses to eat, and also obviously she follows the true advocacy of veganism around the things that she's using healthcare and clothing and things. That was her life before, and then when she moved into powerlifting, that just continued. That was a natural thing. Whereas you see things like in Game Changers, there was there's Patrick, I'll probably pronounce it wrong, but Baboonian, yeah, who is an amazing advocate for veganism, but is very much about he will be the guy lifting the bus with a carrot in his teeth. It's very much like that is his angle. and there's a lot of that, but I didn't get that sense from her.
No, and I, it's something that a theme that comes up in the podcast a few times is what's effective, kind of as a form of activism, and everyone's got this different form of activism, and so on and so forth. And I definitely think that the Patrick Baboumian approach, as we've now coined that particular phrase, the Baboumian method, is there's that obviously gains a lot of traction. There's no doubt about it. But I think it's interesting, like we say, listening to somebody like Sophia, where it comes from perhaps probably a less overt place. I wonder whether it actually enables more people to come in on it a little bit and ask her questions and not feel threatened. That they're going to be told they're wrong. Depends on your angle. It's always the case, isn't it? With are you kind of loud and overt? Is it slowly? All those kind of, it's the same argument whether you're a power lifter or an activist who does who does their activism on the street. It's what's the best methodology.
Yeah. It's interesting. I've had conversations with people. It often comes nutrition. Often comes up. People's reasoning for not being vegan is, well, maybe not even so much that kind of you can't be healthy on a vegan diet, but just where it's just a bit of a faff, and I have to. It's quicker and easier for me to to intake these specific by eating meat, and they are right. But at the same time, I think I find the nutrition thing a bit of a non-argument personally, because I think you can be incredibly healthy on a carnivorous or a omnivorous diet, as you can on a vegan diet, and likewise you can be incredibly unhealthy on a vegan diet, and on a carnivorous. So I don't really, it never really comes down to being vegan for my health. It's not. I think Sophia came to veganism for all of those reasons. She owned dogs, and she, felt like there was inconsistencies in her own ethics. And then when she decided to be powerlifting, she was like, well, okay, well, what do I need to be consuming to build the body I need to be able to do my thing? Okay, well, this is what I need to eat. But she's a great person to be able to put in front of somebody that says, oh, well, but you're always going to be, you feel a bit tired all the time. You're a bit weak. You're like, no, not at all. I would do if I ate, KFC, as a vegan KFC, and, Krispy Kreme donuts every day, but I don't. I eat sensibly.
Yeah.
She's just the nth degree of that.
100%. There's a point that you mentioned there that actually I think did also really strike me about that interview with her, and actually powerlifting generally, because in full transparency, I think when I went into it, I don't think I really understood the true extent of the difference between powerlifting and bodybuilding. I kind of thought there'd be more crossover there. I don't, just naivety, through anything else. And I think what really struck me about it was that with powerlifting, it feels much more like I don't mean to disrespect anybody who's a bodybuilder, but it felt like a real means to an end that wasn't about an aesthetic. Doesn't matter what you look like in powerlifting. It's a simple fact. Can you move that? Can that be picked up? Which I personally find it's got a, perhaps more democracy to it, almost, maybe. It's less prone to ego, maybe. At least that was how it came across to me. And certainly given her, Sophia's battles which she was, incredibly open about, and, very humble to, I felt very humbled to have her share those kind of things, that having gone through what she'd been through from an eating disorder perspective, it was almost very important to her as well to find that sport that was, that wasn't about aesthetic. it was about feeling strong, and it was about feeling positive about yourself, which I thought was another reason why she's just a great ambassador for not only veganism but just life in general, body image, and social media and all those kind of things. If I had a if my little boy's too young at the moment, but as he grew up, somebody like Sophia strikes me as an amazing role model, perhaps versus some of those more aesthetically driven fitness influencer types. At least that was my take on it.
Yeah, no, I'd agree. There's plenty of them around that's all you growing muscle with protein, and then proving that you can do it with on plants. They're all around, and it's like an ongoing argument. But I think I'm the same as you. I don't know enough about bodybuilding, but it is an aesthetic thing, is my understanding, and it does come down to interpretation to some extent. Surely they are judged based on but powerlifting is lift that and you go through to the next round and keep lifting things until you can't lift them anymore. It's much more quantifiable. But she's represented at the highest level, and seemingly from the stuff that I was not too familiar with her until I listened to the podcast and then followed her on social and things, but it is all very much under the radar. She's not really posting loads of stuff about saying that this is what I can do because of my plant-based diet. It's just that's just a part of who she is. And she's a great advocate for the it shouldn't stand in your way being vegan. It's just you are aligning your ethics with your actions with your ethics, and then she's gone on to do great things, and it hasn't stood in her way, much like it shouldn't for anybody.
100%.
More power to her.
Exactly. Should we move on? Who should we talk about next? You've got a list there, so let's do it in order of your list.
Well, we started at the middle of my list.
I thought you were going to say like a Drake line then, but started in the middle doesn't really...
Let's talk about the Reading Hunt Sabs.
Oh yeah, I've got one of their t-shirts on.
Yeah, you're repping all the merch.
Little zip for the audio there. that was just a hoodie that was being unzipped there. Just for people who are concerned. Reading Hunt Sabs. Yeah, I've just got huge admiration for folks who take this kind of direct action. I think as much as in many episodes I've talked about activism being all these different forms, and I do firmly believe that, and there shouldn't, there isn't a ranking to what's better or worse, but I would say I hold in very high regard the folks at Sea Shepherd, or I think we'll talk about in a bit, and Hunt Sabs who are putting themselves very much at risk, on a week to week basis to take direct action. And I think it's really easy. I feel this myself. It's if your activism is hosting a podcast, you're in a comfortable space in the warm without anybody threatening you, and you've got to post things on social media, and it's all very, you can have a bit of a cocooned idea of and think, and you can overinflate your role in the world of activism. You can think I'm doing great things, whereas I think those folks, that's a commitment that's unsung, that goes on week to week. Sometimes in mid-season they're going out a couple of times, maybe 2 or 3 times a week around day jobs and all the rest of it. So, and can't, they're not, it's not for any other reason than stopping harm to animals. They're not getting more followers. There's not more likes. It's genuine in its intention. So I've got a huge amount of admiration and respect for those folks.
Yeah, there was something that they mentioned in there about there being a quantifiable reward of that direct action, which is really interesting. So I've done street activism. So I've done the standing in the street and in hopefully guiding people to more information and handing out flyers. But you never really, I follow various street outreach people online, and there's the classic, like, this guy had this he had this conversation, and what he spoke about immediately changed his mind to veganism. That doesn't happen, really. It doesn't happen. You hopefully plant seeds, and maybe you have some sort of an impact. What I found really fascinating about what they're doing is that there's a huge amount of times when they're not getting anywhere, but they know there are times when they've put themselves directly in between a pack of dogs and an innocent fox, and the distraction that them being in the way has allowed that fox to escape and live until the next time, and they can go home satisfied that they have done that, which, I mean, is a phenomenal sacrifice for them, but that they live for that, which and it's just unbelievable. And it's not, I mean, it is believable. It's incredible that they do that.
Yeah, it really is. And it's just, I think this is a bit of a general concern, I think, in the quote unquote sort of vegan community generally, is that it's becoming sanitized and corporatized and capitalized upon, that we're all content saying, well, we've done our bit because we're now eating vegan cornettos, and we're on Instagram saying, we repost the odd bit, and so we're really doing our bit. And I don't know. I think there's a danger we just completely lose sight of what the point of it is. I spoke to Amy Buxton recently. We were chatting about it the other week, the editor of the Vegan Review, and talking about kind of vegan news sources. The sort of the news publications, and sometimes worry that what it's turning into, or what it's the perception of it is turning into, the social media presence of it is turning into, is, X company has brought out a new range of vegan junk food, and we're seeing that as progress, whilst fox hunts are getting £10,000 COVID subsidies to survive through, because they can't go out hunting. If we're not vocal about that sort of stuff, are we actually doing anything? If we're not being proactive, are we actually doing anything, or are we just replacing one exploitative system with another, which won't have the ongoing benefits that we want it to have? It will just move the exploitation probably from animals to people, in certain that's my sort of worry about it. And there's people far more articulate who can put that argument out there, but
I think it's it's interesting that I've definitely done I've done the sharing on social media, and I will continue to do so. And often I will sometimes lead with that message of absolve yourself of the responsibility of being a part of this. Align your, said it once already, but align your actions with your ethics and just remove yourself from the situation, because then you can rest easy and you are consistent, which is okay. And if everybody did that, then we would be, a lot closer to a better place. But we, animals would still continue to be harmed. And I think that this is a different, it's an offshoot of veganism that is not, I don't think is not part of the normal, not the normal, is not part of the sort of most people's conscience, because it's happening not behind closed doors, but out in the country where people aren't seeing this stuff. People are aware of a ban, think the ban is, and in fact, 85% of people think that the ban, should remain and all that kind of stuff, but that's not being adhered to. And so I definitely, this is a select group of people who have a mindset and an attitude to go out, sacrifice this isn't a case of sacrifice, picking something different in a shopping trolley and knowing that you aren't causing any harm to animals, and you maybe one, every year you might go, oh, look how many animals I've saved. I've saved one animal a day for the last year because I haven't consumed meat or dairy or eggs. So, that's great. And that is great. And more people should do that. But these people are going out and finding individual animals that are being tortured by grown men that really have, more money and time on their hands that could surely find other hobbies to be spending their money on, and saving their lives. And I have the absolute utmost respect for them. And I actually tried to think back to how I felt about hunt sabs before I went vegan, and actually probably before I listened to your conversation, because it is a relatively secret society, and it's not a secret society, but I mean, there's little known about it, understandably, because they're not sharing, they're not going on social, as you say, social media, sharing, because they want to protect their own identities and things for understandable reasons. There was a lot of interesting stuff talking about masks and how, this is pre-COVID, how masks were interpreted, which may change. I think it's, people will still find them imposing.
So you were last I heard we were talking about we were in the you just mentioned masks.
Okay. Where was I with masks? Yeah, I guess my point is that there is a community of people that I knew very little about, and still know very little about. I have the utmost respect for what they do, and I definitely couldn't do it myself. And they definitely sit on the fringes, I think, of veganism, because it's a very, very different. You talk about veganism being a lifestyle and not a diet. That is a very unique and specific. I don't know. For me, it just, I kind of almost, I have thought a lot about. So I've done street activism. I've done a Cube of Truth. I would like to go to a save vigil. There's almost like a kind of, I hate to say it, but like a veganism bingo, which I'd like to kind of tick off all of the individual things to have experienced it. I feel like I should go to see the animals on the way into the slaughterhouse and do that and experience that. I don't think that hunt sabbing, and in fact, I'm sure it's not something that you can just do once to see what it's like. You need to understand it. You need to commit to it, and you need to be prepared to go there to get hurt or injured and risk yourself, and that is a phenomenal sacrifice to make for the life of an animal. And you and I will both say that we are huge advocates for animals, and would stop a car to save an injured animal in the road, much like many non-vegans would. But these are dangerous people that they're going up against, and they made it very, very clear in the podcast that they're going to that dangerous, powerful people that they're going up to do. You really need to know your stuff, need to be able to protect yourself and organize your life in a way that makes you anonymous to these people, both during the hunt and outside of it. So I think it's it's not a part-time hobby. It's not a part of that, that, and they're all good things to do. I've learned huge amounts from street activism and Cubes of Truth, and I do intend to, go do safe vigils. And you come back and you learn something, but that is something that I mean, there's clearly a huge amount of camaraderie and friendship, and it was fantastic to hear them say that they get to run around the countryside with their friends, and just unfortunately there are angry, red-faced men who shout at them, and dogs that might potentially hurt them. So it's not something that they're just, that they appear to be, afraid to do. They go out there to do it, to enjoy it, or to at least be there in the moment. But it is a learned skill that you have to, and it has to be something in your psychology to be somebody that will do that, like you said, 2-3 times a week. Amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a point I'll pick up on that you mentioned there. I think it's really interesting about I think we often will say to folks who are omnivorous, who are perhaps talking about veganism, and they are, it's exclusively talking about diet, and we'll refer to, it's a lifestyle, it's not a diet, there's more, it's more to it than that. I think there's almost a pejorative meaning of lifestyle now when we think about the lifestyle in terms of, it's almost like vegan for the lifestyle, like the kind of influencer, Instagram-y kind of perception of, look at this salad bowl, look at this this porridge that I've made this morning, and how many seeds I could have put in it. And I think, again, going back to the point about, if you asked most people in the street, omnivorous, vegan, whatever, do you, would you support the ban on fox hunting? Like you said, 85%, I think they mentioned it in the podcast, would say absolutely, I support it. But I still think, if you'd said to people, what do you think of hunt sabs? I still think there's a distrust that's been, the seeds have been sown by some of the folks in the sort of the countryside alliances, and the hunt organisations, that's sort of filtrated into the common culture, which is, and maybe it's connected to the mask wearing and all the rest of it, that is that these are, countryside thugs who are going looking for a fight and so on, which is just not the case. I'm sure there's one or two bad apples, like there is in everything, but actually, every person I've met linked with it is, incredibly compassionate, and is only out there for the right reasons. So it's kind of interesting, because I'd love people to sort of almost, even if, like you and I have said, I can't imagine being able to do that and have the bravery that they have, but not being able to do it, don't just settle for, I'm supporting veganism by taking a photo of my porridge. Go and support the hunt sabs, even if it's financial, if you can. Appreciate that's difficult. Buying some of their merch. Sometimes they've got appeals out there looking for support to get a vehicle back on the road because it's been damaged or sabotaged by the hunt. So I think, support your local hunt sabs, I guess, is my message there. They're an incredible asset to our quote unquote community, and they should be heralded, is my view.
Absolutely, yeah.
Probably leads us nicely onto Captain Hammerstead. Should we get into that one? Sea Shepherd?
Yeah, let's. The other branded merch that you're wearing.
Yes, yes. Supporting less of a local one in this particular case, um, but yeah. That one. I mean, I try and not get too overawed by folks, but when I was a bit of a super fan, really, of
Yeah,
Captain Hammerstead. Just the length of time he's. I think the thing that just strikes me, when you listen back to the interview, just I mean, he's an incredibly articulate person and amazing at presenting facts and so on, and that really helps. But the commitment from such a young age, at 16, I still can't imagine the conversation where you say to your friends and family, "I'm leaving to go and work in the oil room of a boat, which is going to go and stop whaling ships around the world from killing innocent animals." I can't imagine that conversation, and then to still be there, or probably another 16 years, 20 years later, and still doing that, and have done what he's done. Again, it's in the same vein as the Hunt Sabs, I think, but out on the sea. But I think what's interesting there is, if we'd said, going back to our 85% point, I think if you said to most folks, what's the issue in the ocean, and they talk about plastic and so on and so forth, I think fishing is not people still associate it with a lesser evil, than eating meat. Even if they'd still eat meat, they probably, if they put it on a scale, I mean, the fact that, pescatarian, for example, that there's this one type of dietary choice that excludes cruelty to animals unless they happen to live in the sea, which is, it's a very odd. So it's almost like in the general populace's mindset, you've got humans at the top of the pyramid, then you've got land animals, and like anything that you can't see day to day that lives in the ocean is even less worth, which is a really and so I think what Peter Hammerstead talks about and Sea Shepherd are doing is amazing in highlighting that fact, because the scale of it is unbelievable. Fish, just legal fishing, not it's everyone can get behind the anti-whaling stuff. I think people who've watched Whale Wars when it was on TV and all that kind of stuff can, where they saw some of the Sea Shepherd folks in action, that can get behind the idea of this Japanese whaling fleet harpooning whales and the blood in the ocean. You can get behind that, but the just factory fishing, the fact that there's, I think it's close to 1 million fish caught every 30 seconds in the scale is astronomical.
It's terrifying.
Which we're emptying the oceans. So I think their work is so important.
Yeah, and I mean, he references about calling fish stock and harvesting, and I know that we talk about beef. We don't necessarily refer to the specific animals, but fish, as you say, are it's on a level that it doesn't get shared, and in fact that's a brutality that people see or sorry that may have experienced in their lives. There's something seemingly, I don't know, there's something I don't think that the human brain connects with the idea of fish as a life in the same way that we perhaps do with with sheep as a life, or cows as a life, and certainly not as dogs as a life. When you think about how that dissonance between humans and animals, vegans much more connected to animals as a sentient being. We still don't make that connection with fish, and perhaps that's to do with the size, or and the what you see, these masses of fish all moving around and stuff. It's quite otherworldly. We can't really comprehend that. But then there's some amazing document. There's the octopus one doing the rounds on Netflix. You understand the intelligence of dolphins and things, and people will go, oh, do that. But we disconnect them, and it's partly because we just can't see it. We don't see it. Maybe we were brought up to do fishing as a kid, or you might have held a crab line down when you've gone down to the beach for a weekend, and you just pulled a living creature out of the sea, sat it in your bucket for 2 hours while it's and maybe it's died, or maybe you've put it, but I think we cultivate a complete disregard for marine life as life. And then that on this astronomical scale where it's happening thousands of miles away, it's staggering to me. And the numbers just, I did a presentation for work recently around veganuary, and just trying to kind of give people some statistics, and that statistic that you and I have spoken about, the plastic straws versus fishing nets one, obviously always comes up, the 0.0001% being plastic straws and the 48% being fishing nets. And yet people just go, oh, okay, well, yeah, I'm just doing my bit though. And it's like, you're not doing your bit. You're not making a sacrifice. You're just choosing to drink your milkshake with a different thing. You're still eating, sushi and all this kind of stuff. So yeah, but that comes up. But we talk about fishless oceans in 2048, which is, that's not long away.
No.
And it's, they're just dragging fish out of the oceans. And yeah, I mean, the numbers around that terrify me possibly more than the stuff I see about cattle and livestock, because seemingly there's not as much stuff happening with it.
Yeah,
I don't feel like there is as much communication around it, and that's why organizations like Sea Shepherd are so important. And he referenced this what he referred to as a law enforcement vacuum, whereby we go, oh, there are laws to stop with Brexit stuff's going on, with fishing laws and stuff like that. It's all happening hundreds of miles. It's just being largely ignored, and so they live to ensure that these laws are being upheld, whereas we would kind of be like, well, it'll be taken care of because we'll make sure that stuff doesn't happen. And it's like, no, that's what Sea Shepherd are doing, and if they weren't there, those rules would be ignored, because they can come back into port and go, oh yeah, we accidentally caught all of this other stuff that we didn't need, but hey, now we've got it.
Yeah, it's you're absolutely right. It's as much as there are these international laws that govern waters, which in itself is, like you mentioned the Brexit debate there, the fact that there's British fish that happen to swim, in this imaginary lot. I mean, even this notion of ownership of parts of the ocean is just insanity, let alone the fact that it's then, not enforced in any way, shape or form. So yeah, Sea Shepherd's work is invaluable. I think Peter raised another. It was there was a question I used to ask, and I think I probably asked it to you in episode 1. In fact, I know I did. I thought it was this is a really cool question, and I've stopped asking it since. Which is, do you think there'll be we can move to being in a vegan world or whatever? And it was that episode with Captain Hammerstead that made me stop asking that question, when because his answer was just, yeah, it just made me realize that I've not seen anything, and I'm coming at this from a very, very narrow perspective. And his answer was essentially kind of a, be careful of the bubble in which you live, and not having the perspective of, say, a West African artisanal fisherman who whose habitat climate cannot afford to grow enough food to eat, and let alone sell. And so small scale fishing is their livelihood, is their life.
Yeah.
And he talked about how Sea Shepherd will actively protect that fisherman over, by stopping factory farming fleets from fishing in those waters. And that again made me just think about, people will often say it's not, it's too difficult to go vegan and so on. And I think in our Western culture, I think that by and large, and there's probably some exceptions, is a nonsense. There probably, there is that it can be done. It might be a lack of knowledge or so on and so forth, but you don't have to eat expensive meat substitutes and so on. It can be done. But it did make me think there are parts of the world and different societies and communities where it's not quite as straightforward as picking up the latest Bosch cookbook, or popping onto YouTube to watch a recipe from Deliciously Ella and then ordering it on Ocado to your house, and oh no, we haven't got enough tempeh. That sort of thing is quite. It is a different. It's a different world to the reality that others live in. So he raised. It just did make me think. It's a really broad discussion, and it's almost better that we put it in terms of planetary habitat destruction and limiting it, rather than this sort of shape-shifting definition of vegan or not. That's almost useful in our culture, but is it useful everywhere in the world? I don't like, arguably, as although we are vegan and so on, living in our Western capitalist consumer-driven culture, we still cause way more harm than an artisanal fisherman who's fishing on an incredibly small scale for the village in which they live. The damage we're causing is far worse. So I think it comes back to this argument of, it's really easy to think, well, because I eat vegan and I put chia seeds on my porridge every morning, that I've completed it. I don't need to do anything else. Yeah. And I think that's dangerous. And I think Peter Hammerstedt kind of put that thought in my mind anyway.
Yeah. And I mean, he's absolutely right to do that. He's looking for sustainability. They are advocating sustainability as opposed to all out stopping. I mean, I say that I guess they would want to get to sustainability, and then would probably want to get to the point where they're not, they talk about overfishing. 90% of the world's oceans are overexploited. So there's only 10% are actually healthy. So that their aim now is just move that needle to a more sustainable place. It just so happens that everybody, they all advocate for veganism and vegans, my understanding, because that's ultimately where they would want to get to. But I think he's obviously right in the sense of, well, let's just get to a place where we're not getting to kind of mass extinction, human extinction, in a few generations time. I mean, just terrifying, terrifying stuff. And I think that fish, I don't know, Kurt Cobain said it, that it's okay to eat fish, they don't have any feelings. I think there's when you see the videos, you watch Dominion, and you can hear pigs screaming and cows screaming, and in fact they show large scale fishing happening in Finding Nemo. Like, it's in a kids film. They don't, that, and it's awful, and it is a scary, tense moment, but it's still this, and all it's these fish trying to, spoilers for Finding Nemo, but we just can't compute the loss of life. It's just, but at that level, which is why I think we can associate or understand better the whaling, or the is it called the cove, the all that you can see it, blood everywhere. We don't see that when they're pouring millions, thousands, hundreds of thousands of fish just onto the deck of a boat, and they're all suffocating under the weight of each other's bodies, and we just accept that as, just look at that like it's, I don't know, grain or
like you say, literally in a kids film. That's how disconnected, more so than you wouldn't see whenever you see a farmer in a kid's book. It's the farmer has cows, but you never see what happens to the cows. Whereas like you say, you see a fisherman, we're so disconnected that the fisherman can have a boat full of fish, and that's like, oh, that's cool. This thousands of dead bodies. It's insane that there's the dissonance is at another level. Yeah. Should we move on? That's rather heavy stuff. That they're all
I mean, the
heavy.
only thing that I would add on Sea Shepherd is that they, which just to lighten the note somewhat, they have done, and it's interesting that you just refer back to right at the beginning. We talk about they're kind of like the hunt sabs. They're out there, the direct action. Yeah. The interesting thing with Sea Shepherd is they've done a fantastic job of marketing themselves to the point that they're kind of seen as these, they obviously they were forged from Greenpeace. Really, and my understanding is that one of the original founders of Greenpeace who just didn't feel like they were actually doing stuff. They were kind of just swapped in red tape and weren't actually going out to do stuff. And as a result, Sea Shepherd was born. So, I was first introduced to Sea Shepherd as a, I think there's a patron in a band that I follow who wore their stuff, and then I looked into it that way, and so they've done a really, really great job of doing that. And actually, a few people that aren't vegan, that don't particularly understand the world in which I live in, and they know Sea Shepherd, they know who they are and what they do to an extent, but it hasn't stopped them eating fish, sadly. So there's probably more work to be done there. But I think they've done a fantastic job of getting the name out there. Again, if you're out there, support them, buy their merch. They've got some very cool merch out there. Yeah. But again, ships are getting damaged. They need support. Just so happens that you can buy some cool stuff. Rep their name, and
we've got a cool range of masks out as well. Very, very relevant to today. So if you want those, I think let this hold out.
There's little. It really feels like there's little we can do in that regard. From the fish that is happening hundreds of miles out to sea. As a if you want to get involved in stopping foxes being killed, you could go and do that. I think it's if it's in your psychology and your makeup to do that, fantastic. I think they do recruit Sea Shepherd, but that's a commitment. That's a 9-month unpaid trip out, swabbing decks and getting knee deep and risking your life. So these people are absolute heroes out there. So 100%. Support them, and
it's worth looking into, because I think they do some they do offer some opportunities to volunteer kind of on land for various things, either talking about what they do to raise the awareness. There's some beach clean type activities. It's well worth taking a look, because like you say, it is not everyone has the makeup to go as far as Peter Hammarstedt did, or the personal circumstances to be able to do that. Although if I had a conversation with my 16-year-old self, I might say, get yourself on that boat and off you go. It will be great. But yeah, I think there are some opportunities. But in short of that, the merchandise, donations, whatever it may be. Stay Close Clothing as well, who's been on the podcast as well. They have done a sort of a range of merchandise for Sea Shepherd as well, which is sort of extra cool. He also Harkey from Stay Close does a range that supports financially. Profits go to Hunt Sabs as well. So worth checking out him if you want to support both causes and a local very local to you actually business. So yeah,
2 for 1 deal.
Yeah, support where you can.
It's becoming an advert now.
It is little dotted with adverts, but ethically sound adverts.
Absolutely.
I'm not advertising a range of pizzas.
Yeah, or mattresses made out of dolphins.
Oh no! Which mattress is made of? Oh, perhaps we shouldn't say. Well, it's the hallmark of any podcaster is that they've got a mattress advert, and I haven't had one yet, so not sure I want one unless there's like an ethically produced vegan mattress that can be sourced. But anyway,
yeah.
That's a little aside. If you are an an ethical manufacturer of mattresses and you're looking for somewhere to advertise your podcast, then advertise your wares. Sorry, I will. I'll happily read an advert for you. Okay, should we move on?
Let's.
Where do you want to go next? Out of our choices,
I feel like let's talk about Carol J. Adams.
Yes,
and the sexual politics of meat, and that, which was I mean, that's you. I mean, and you'll be able to, but you did incredibly well to keep up. But I mean, an amazing conversation. What an incredible person, legend, really, in the world of veganism. But yeah, I mean, I think I texted you after, possibly, I think I did, to say what, like, you did incredibly well just to stay on on a level with her, because she's
whether I
she's,
did or
she's
not.
in the she's Neo in the Matrix. She's she's gone so far down the other, she just sees the world in a different way.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely wasn't worthy to be in that conversation and was incredibly lucky. It was probably about 8 or 9 months in the making. I think I'd asked Carol to be a guest on the podcast really early on, like really naively. I at the beginning, with no reputation built or followers or listeners gathered, just decided to reach out to a bunch of people, and Carol was a mate from almost from day one, was like, yeah, happy to have a conversation. And I think about 8 or 9 months later, we got a kind of, she's incredibly busy and so on, and it happened to align with the 30th anniversary of Sexual Politics of Meat. But like you say, keeping up with Carol intellectually is not a task that I'm capable of doing. But
imagine having a conversation with her where you attempted to disagree with her. Like, I think that was what, she has some, incredible, she's she knows the world, and as she's peeled away all the layers of the onion, can see. But I can just imagine if you didn't agree, or you just you weren't vegan, or you weren't doing your bit to remove, dismantle the patriarchy and support, be a feminist and all that stuff, you would just you would get absolutely taken apart.
Well, the closest I got to any kind of attempt at, wasn't even challenge really, but was, I think I asked a question which now seems actually quite well. Actually, I still stand by the question, and I shall explain why when I talk about the question. But there was a question I asked about, for many people, the choice between Trump and Biden in the sort of, at that point, it was a forthcoming election, so we hadn't got to all of the, the insurrection by this point. But I was saying, for many people, the choice between Trump and Biden, is it essentially two sides of the same coin? I.e., the system hasn't really changed, just the tone of voice. It's, I think, for people who follow Double Down News, which is a kind of an attempt at kind of a freer, less influenced, quite liberal leaning news channel online, often fronted by George Monbiot. He did a video recently where he talked about domesticated capitalism versus this kind of, I think he called it warlord capitalism. And so on the one side, you've got the warlord capitalism of the Chinese regime, of the Russian regime, of Trump's attempts at replicating a similar kind of strongman-led governmental system in America. And then you've got this domesticated version, which is, Obama, Biden, Tony Blair, this kind of like, neoliberal, centrist kind of, and essentially the argument is that they're really the same system. Just one is trying to strip away regulations quite overtly and put power more and more so into that of oligarchs and billionaires, and the other is doing the same thing, just in a slightly more palatable methodology, with the seeming veil of progressiveness, whereas you could argue under an Obama regime, police brutality didn't go away, gun crime didn't go away, systemic racism didn't go away, mass surveillance increased, whistleblowers were targeted. You could argue these things, and so that was my attempt at a question, and I thought she understandably batted it away excellently with an answer that said, essentially no. And I do agree with the point, which was, this domesticated capitalism and sort of all out fascism are not, not the same coin at all. They're not, the domesticated capitalism is problematic, don't get me wrong, but it's not fascism, which is kind of where we were, or are still kind of in the hopefully dying throes of. But yeah,
I think should people listening to this hopefully they'll aim to listen to go back and listen to them if they haven't, or revisit them. This one I found particularly interesting to revisit because of the passage of time between what has happened, and there's so many signposts that get talked about. I mean, it's been it's not a new thing, but there's a piece in the conversation talking about fascism and the rise of alt-right and the connection between fascism and there's a really interesting piece about the cow's milk and lactose intolerance, and that being like a sign of power. So some amazing things in there. But when she talks about the rise of fascism, I listened. I think it was. I want to say January of last year. Or maybe not. Maybe it was later. But what has happened in that time has just been, unbelievable. And just I mean, some amazing stuff. I wrote, I noted down about retrograde politics hangs its hat on meat and dairy.
Yeah,
I mean, if that's not a reason to go vegan, then I don't know what is.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And if you pick up a copy of the book, it's another little ethical advert for us. But when you pick up a copy of the book, and I think there's a companion piece to it which talks of or shows some of the images, the many images that Carol's been sent since the book's original publication, that show exactly that link, that patriarchal link being made between the dehumanization of women and the dehumanization or I suppose the not even dehumanization, but the degrading of animals, and putting them on the same level, which kind of sits in the psyche with people. That's really staggering, because I think I've sort of perhaps poorly explained to somebody the kind of the blurb of which is impossible to do, of Carol's kind of a philosophy on this, and they've kind of been almost skeptical, I think, at that little blurb, like, well, that's not a thing, that those two things aren't. But when you start to see the thousands upon thousands of images, and then start to notice them in your day-to-day life, these connections, it's incredible, how deep these things go. And I think, like, that whole intersectionalism, intersectional veganism piece that Carol talks about, I've funny enough, I see so many people in the vegan community unable to or unwilling to accept that notion that those things are all connected. And on a personal note, I can't see how you can feel they're not, because the world is been set up, created, and managed by a certain group of people, and those people have put everybody, and every being beneath them, at their heel, and so I think it's clear the language is similar, the imagery is similar, for me. But I appreciate lots of folks in the vegan community will say, no, it's not about worrying about feminist issues, or we're just here for the animals. I think you can't be apolitical and be vegan, is my view, but I accept people have different ones.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't profess to be an expert. I certainly wouldn't consider myself to be um, a, a, a good. Well, how do I put this? I don't think I'd be able to find the right words to be able to express what feminism and veganism and the relation between the two. I just know that before I went vegan, just didn't see that at all. And now, as a father of two young children, I just see you see abuse of mothers and females, and the industry itself centers around the rape and abuse and murder of females, whether they be chickens or cows or animals, or all the way through. It is a patriarchal problem, and these industries have grown and succeeded, and we are at the point. And a lot of people who I speak to about veganism who say I couldn't be vegan, but I really do have a problem with the factory farming bit. I really would like to get back to. I'd like to get back to a place where we kept, just small holdings and all that kind of stuff. And it's, sure, okay, that's nice for you. Wouldn't we all, then we could decide what sort of a problem it is then. But those industries grew on the greed of effectively white men who abused their power to create that problem. So, and Carol, Adams has been talking about it for decades, and it's her point has been, it's not been that she made that point and it's become muddied over time. It's become cemented over time.
100%.
Which is an indictment on us as a human race, seemingly.
Yeah, agreed. And I would suggest anybody to read that book, Sexual Politics of Meat. It's as much as Carol is obviously an absolute genius, I would say, certainly an incredible visionary to have seen these connections so long ago. The way it's written is not impenetrable at all, as much as it is for me to say that word. But it's understandable for folks to read. It's relatable, and you will, once you read it, start seeing things that you were there all along. Everything from signs in cafes to pictures on the sides of buses to you start seeing these things, these images. This language is around us all the time, as much as we in the sort of the vegan community see. We see that when it comes to animal abuse, we start to see that that an episode of Postman Pat has got Alf spraying his sheep with spray paint to denote that they are his property and so on. We can spot that because we've been through this journey. I'd recommend folks to go on that journey with Carol, and you'll see a whole set of links that I hadn't, and that's remiss of me, until I'd started to read her work. She's got another fantastic book which is called Burger, which is well worth reading as well. She talks a little bit about that in the podcast as well, about this the sort of, I guess, the masculine and patriarchal links and ideology around the idea of a burger, what it means in society, this notion of a burger. And it's incredible. It's a short book, easy to read, but again, incredible. So yeah, and like you said, I can't do justice to her work, other than say go and listen to the podcast and then read the books.
Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent. We've got one more on our list. Is that right?
We've got one more.
One more to talk about.
Yeah, let's talk about Laura Chepner.
Let's.
Primary education. That's not that all these subjects were very close. All these subjects are very close to our heart. This one is also quite close to our home.
Yeah, absolutely.
As well, I would say.
Absolutely. I think there's, it was probably when we talked about doing, pulling together kind of 5 episodes and having a conversation about them. I don't know that I'd necessarily seen the link until we started to talk about them, and I think the link is probably in. I think there's a bit of role models taking action in their own ways, is probably the link, and I appreciate that. Lots of the folks that I've interviewed and been lucky enough to have spent time with everyone's taking action to some extent in varying ways. And that's kind of a theme of the podcast we talked about before, that activism comes in many forms. And all of those folks are doing something positive for the community in the world. But I picked Laura and primary education just because I think this is, I've not come across anybody doing this, or having this conversation. And there's a level of, again, bravery in what Laura does, insofar as I think it would be really easy for a teacher, a parent who is not necessarily tuned into the needs of vegan children or the ideas of veganism, to dismiss veganism, what she's talking about, and the fact that she's putting herself out there on a day-to-day basis to get into that conversation and ultimately help vegan parents and vegan kids feel more included on their day-to-day lives at school, which is an area that, I don't know about you, but as a vegan parent with a vegan kid who isn't yet at school age, it does scare me, and it's reassuring to know that there's somebody like Laura out there prepared to help with those conversations.
Yeah, 100%. I didn't. It will probably cover some old ground on that conversation that we had right back at the beginning. But when people say are you going to bring your child up vegan, and of course you are, but I don't think I'd really considered what that would mean for her until she started going to nursery. She's been so I've got a 3.5-year-old daughter and a nearly 6-week-old son, but we didn't think about that for Ren, my daughter, until she went, and then we said, oh, she's vegan. I didn't think they would just go great, but we'd moved from Brighton, where they were fairly clued up. We knew they would be fairly clued up, and we had to tell them what that meant, what it meant, to be vegan. And they were like, okay, and they took it all on board, which was great. But I still spent a year or so, probably, and still even now a little bit, unconvinced that they actually did anything differently. The upshot being that Ren is very eloquent, and she, even now, I'll put dinner in front of her and she'll go, "Is this vegan?" And I'll say, "Yes, Ren, it is. Of course it is." But she'll just, which is great, and I'll say, "That's a great question to ask," because I worry that she will, she'll go to school, or someone, or she'll go and stay at a friend's house once this COVID nonsense is out the way, and she'll be able to hopefully go and stay at friends' houses, and a parent might make them something. It's great that she'll be able to ask that, but I don't feel equipped, until I'd heard about Laura and the work that she was doing, to be able to, we've applied for schools now, and starting school in September. to go in and have a conversation with a school. Her nursery is 30 kids tops. We spoke to the manager and she's like, yeah, it's fine. We can rustle something up. It's not a problem. It's all quite local. This is a school of a few hundred children, where she'll be having probably school meals, if ideally, she would do that. I had no idea how to go into that conversation. So like you say, the fact that, Laura's out there and she is opening up those conversations, and not only opening up those conversations, talking to people on a level that they can absorb what it is that she is saying. Because if I went into school and I said, well, my daughter must have this because it's her fundamental right to and the school kind of kick up a fuss, I would probably go, oh, do you know what? We'll just make her pack lunch. We'll make her pack lunch every day, and that's all fine. If you can get into the actual school and get them to start thinking differently, it's not just about making sure that Ren doesn't eat animal products. It's about educating potentially hundreds of children about what they're eating and giving them perhaps creating little mini activists and helping the teachers to join the dots and things. And we talk a lot about being a vegan, that it's always in the front of my mind, the sort of pay it forward piece. It's not enough to just absolve the responsibility and just not be a part of it. Sure, that's enough for some people. Personally, it's not. I love it if someone messages me and says, I'm eating less meat and dairy because you helped me understand this, or you shared that thing, or we had that conversation about this and stuff. Love that. Ren is doing it now. As a result, the nursery, she's in 3 days because it's easier. 2 of the 3 days she's in, all the kids eat what Ren eats. So all of a sudden you've got 20, 30 kids all eating a coconut chickpea curry. I haven't achieved that in my 4 years as a vegan activist, with air quotes. So what Laura is doing is giving the teachers those tools to understand it, helping the kids to feel normal. I say, for want of a better expression, that it's it's okay, and making it easy for schools to be able to provide for those kids. And for me, it's an absolute huge weight off my shoulders that I know. I've read. She's got the book is out now. Yeah. Plugging away some things. But
it's the final plug of the evening.
So much free work that she does to spread that message. As just an advocate of veganism is she's an absolute hero in my book.
Agreed. And again, get the book, Primary of Education. Look her up. Yes, doing amazing work. And I think even if those kids aren't, those 100 odd kids in the school or whatever it is, the number aren't turned vegan, it is reassuring to me to think that they would have had a conversation with someone equipped to have it, who will help them make my son, in this case, feel more included and not feel like no one understands what he is going through, or he is doing and why he's doing it, and those kind of things. I'd hate for him to feel ostracized because of a decision we'd made, at this point in his life. And so Laura helping others to understand that, and I'm sure it will cause some folks to think and maybe, to consider their choices themselves. But even if it doesn't, and it makes people more tolerant, more open to conversation, that's a step in the right direction that might not have been there without her. So yeah. And for vegan parents out there, if you are struggling with those conversations, or you don't know even how to tackle it with a school, that's the sort of thing that Laura will support with, and will help that school and those teachers, and has done it up and down the country already, through Primary of Education. So yeah, final plug done. done.
Yeah, I mean it's fab. I mean people out there, being absolute heroes and spreading the message. I feel confident now, almost excited to be able to have a conversation with Ren's new head teacher about hopefully opening up a conversation there. But I wouldn't be able to have felt like that were it not for the work that she does and things. So yeah,
amazing. Well, that's 5 episodes, 5 bloody
it's
vegan
5
episodes,
episodes.
all done.
Get them at your.
You can get them wherever you get podcasts. That's what we say.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, it was interesting going back and listening to them. Some because of the time that's passed, but just because, unlike me, they're all so incredibly eloquent at their making their point, and so hugely passionate about what it is that they do. And I think they're actually a really great cross section of the reason why you started doing the podcast in the first place, of these really interesting, very diverse areas. This is not about just, as I said before, going into the supermarket and picking up different things. That is where it starts. It's the absolute basic level of just stop buying it and then use your passions and your knowledge and your experience and find ways of being able to introduce the conversation to people. There's something that we didn't speak about, but the Lisa Fox and the Vegan Business Tribe, people are out there encouraging, helping businesses to understand how they can be better and how they can spread their message far and wide. I think we all individually have a responsibility to be better. That was the message that came out of Vegan Camp Out a couple of years ago. Was this is great, and it's great that we can walk in and buy a vegan meatball sub from Subway, and there's donuts around. This is all great. It's all great. It just makes life easier. But once you're already over that line, it doesn't stop. You got to pay it forward. Use your your skills, your knowledge, your network, people spread the love, share the information, get it out there, and do what you can to get closer to that
100%.
better world.
100%. Couldn't agree more. There's 65 episodes of the Bloody Vegans to help you along that way. So, without further ado, I think we will end our chat there. It's been lovely having another chat, Chris. You are the third time guest, I believe.
Thanks very much.
I think that's right.
It's been a pleasure.
Yes, we did a live one, didn't we, back in the mid-COVID, when everyone was on Instagram Live. All at the same time, so our connection kept cutting out.
yeah. If you weren't on Instagram Live, you were probably baking banana bread. That was the point that it was.
Yeah. I mean, that's Sometimes when I think, this pandemic has obviously been incredibly tough for a lot of people, but there's also a lot of us who've been so fortunate that we've got to spend more time with our families, go on Instagram Live and make banana bread. So, it wasn't, it could be worse. And big shout out to all those folks who haven't been able to have those wonderful luxuries that we've been afforded.
Of course.
And let's hope we can all move on from this horrible situation pretty soon. So 3 times for Van Praag. Who'd have thought he's getting a hat trick mic?
That's what I get for being a super fan.
You get to take your mic home with you.
Well, I'm excited to see what forms the pod takes over the coming weeks and months.
Yeah, I think well, a conversation for later, but I think that the interview format won't disappear. Just there might hopefully be some other strings to the bloody vegans bow to help get the message out in different ways. But I think just even this little trip down memory lane of the last 65 episodes and just plucking 5 out as that definitely makes me think actually there's if no one else has learned a lot from this, I have. So I'll carry on doing it.
Yeah, I mean, it's it's opened my eyes to that. I think I hadn't even acknowledged really that different really sort of unified by that one thing, and yet the scope of it is astronomical and ever evolving. So no, it's fab. I know you put down your activism but it is a fantastic resource and safe space for I think a lot of people. So
thanks, mate.
It's good. It's fab.
Appreciate it.
And a little bit of updates and changes is always good. Keeps it exciting.
Fresh. Well, there we go. Yeah, it's been emotional. Let's end it there.
All good.